Margaritas, hot tubs, and hotter rock babes. All heading to destinations unknown. From the high seas, here's your rock and roll cruise director, Eddie Trunk.
Okay, we are back and we are live on Cruise to the Edge from the middle of the ocean here on a Tuesday. What a great start to our broadcast all week from this great cruise that focuses on progressive music. And it is a supreme honor to have with me now live on the show a guy who you could safely say was one of the architects of this genre of music, I would think. Mr. Steve Howe, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Steve, for being here. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ed. That's been nice. It's very nice to be here with you, Eddie.
Yes, I've been on. This is my third cruise to the Edge, and it's amazing to see the passion from the fan base.
Yeah.
The Yes fans that come out that enjoy this, and then all the other bands that are a part of it that add to it. The younger bands, the bands that have been around a bit, the bands that started it, like yourself. Right. Is it a fun experience for you every year?
Absolutely. I keep being delighted to run into more and more old friends and more bands being invited in who are part of the history of progressive music, particularly Soft Machine, who I think are very worthy here. And I see John Etheridge is here playing guitar with them. He is amazing. So don't miss that. So it's like that. It's been like a kind of a nest for things to grow in this, although we have many people who've been with us on several occasions, like the wonderful Steve Hackett has joined us on this on several occasions. It's nice to get other people in the frame as well, and when Tony Levin's here with his stick band and things, it's all good. It's all win.
Do you get out much? I mean, Yes headlines this cruise every year. This is really branded as your thing. But do you get a chance to get out much and see some of the bands, or are you busy kind of worrying about your own performances?
Well, a little bit gently. There will be something that I'll allure to eventually, and I think I've got to miss, I can't miss this again.
Right.
It is hard to get the time because we have schedules. Unfortunately, our Q&A got cancelled today, which I think is very regrettable because it's usually a good laugh when we get to rub shoulders a little bit with some of our best fans. But so adjusting to the schedule, and I'll poke my nose in on a few shows.
Yeah. When talking about progressive music, when Yes started and you started with the band so early on in the early 70s, was there even really at that time such a thing as prog, or what were you reaching for? What was influencing you to create what Yes did on those early records?
Well, my reaction to that is really that psychedelia had nowhere to go at that point, 67, 68. It was all a bit kind of, where's that going to go now? And I think after a couple of years, that's what started happening, with the Crimsons and the Yes, with bands like Yes and Genesis, Gentle Giant.
Yeah.
There was a kind of great. It took a little while to kind of get established that we could still carry on thinking psychedelic without being tripped out, and also without being so obscure. Maybe bringing the musicality into it, but allowing all those influences. And I think that's what Yes did epitomize, was that we all came together, but we all brought different parts of the story with us, different appreciations for forms of music that we wanted to have an effect on the band's music. And so it was a lovely mixing pot of music.
Now you came into Yes early on, but of course they existed just before you for a bit. Right. Were you aware of them? Did you ever go see them? What were you doing at that time? How did it happen?
I heard of the band, and I'd heard they were very, very good, but I hadn't seen them or heard very much of them. So the fact that they'd not released Time and a Word, which is really a fantastic record, and took a lot of work to do that with an orchestra, and Tony Colton, an old friend of mine, was producing them. So basically that was a great time because Eddie Offer got on board, so the style of the music was coming together, but also the fact that there was no name for it, which was your previous question.
Right.
And I thought of it as like maybe kind of a soft rock approach would be, or many of the journalists called it things like cinematographic or orchestrated rock, so there was a lot of names for it. But basically, I think, we were amongst that band. And King Crimson deserve a lot of credit, for the great musicians they had in their band, sadly losing Greg Lake. But also, of course, all the other players, and particularly Bob Fripp, told part of the story that we were also part of. We were kind of competitors as much as we were respectful sharers of stages and festivals.
When was the first time you heard the term prog? Do you remember?
No, I don't really, but I suspect it was after the 70s. It wasn't in the 70s.
Really?
I think so. There was no real name for something as it's growing. It didn't have a label. And in fact, it was trying to avoid labels. This was a music that was very hard to label.
Yeah.
So in a way, we did our best. Yes used to joke that we de-commercialized our music.
Yeah.
We didn't repeat the chorus 4 times at the end so that that's all you thought about when you'd finished listening to us. We actually made sure we didn't do that. So we we weren't into commercialism. I suppose that was one of the
hallmarks,
trademarks.
Yes, for sure.
Because there was not a lot. All those bands didn't go out of their way to be at all easy on the ear. We were actually challenging.
But that ties into an interesting question, because you were of course signed to Atlantic Records, and did the label know what to make of it? I mean, to have a label to come along with you like that, to make these epic songs and to experiment musically. Yeah. But at the same time, of course, Yes did have, of course, Roundabout and so many big songs throughout the career. But did you feel ever pressure from the label? Did anybody from the label ever sort of wrangle you and say, "Hey guys, we signed you. We need some 3-minute hit songs"?
Well, when I joined, that third album was crucial to Atlantic. If that hadn't broken through, they may have dropped Yes. Unless somebody could have gone in and taken less money or done something to make the deal work, because they signed 3 albums. And 1 and 2 didn't resonate enough, And as I've said, I loved Time and a Word immensely, but basically it didn't. So it was make or break it for Yes at that point. Fortunately, we made it. We got through. And after that, I think Atlantic and the wisdom of the wonderful Ahmet Ertegun definitely prevails. That his wisdom was, well, look, he signed great artists before, and many of them did have hits, but many of them were like us. Were album oriented. He understood jazz. He understood, the other kinds of music that weren't, instant toe tapping, the whole time. So basically, Ahmet started to believe in the idea that we could deliver a record. Because when we took Fragile, we said, like, make this work. This is one of our best things. Make this work, and it worked. So in fact, there was a double belief. We knew Atlantic could deliver results for bands like ELP and ourselves and Led Zeppelin, to say the least. But we knew they could deliver, but they had to believe in us. And once they did, they let us get on with anything we wanted to do. And there was never an artistic clause. They had no rights artistically to say what we did. But at the same time, they always took what we did and said, okay, this is great, we're going to put this out, And then it started, this pattern where it went gold before, we'd only been out 2 weeks and it was already gold. So we did deliver something they wanted, but they had the distribution.
And did you see an immediate spike in the interest in the band, I would imagine, on the live circuit touring around the time of Fragile and what was going on?
Absolutely, yeah. We'd taken the Yes album on tour in England with Iron Butterfly, opening for Iron Butterfly. And that was very important for us, and we really did have a huge success with the
Still
Yes
kind
album.
of, your hand there is still kind of in the psychedelic world a little bit with Iron Butterfly.
That's right.
And heavy moments too with them also.
Absolutely. But once we did Close to the Edge and we invented the sort of 20-minute Yes piece for ourselves, then I think they might have held their breath when we delivered Topographic. But, it got loved, after all the sort of nervousness about the strangeness of it at first, partly caused by a certain keyboard player who would care to believe that maybe we hadn't got it right. And there were some great things about Tales, and it became a fan, diehard fan, much-loved album. But then we did Relaya, which was, again, very demanding, but it went, so we proved to Atlantic that we had the goods and we were going to come back with another album each time.
Do you still, and this may sound ridiculous with such an accomplished guitar player as yourself, but do you still practice? Do you still ever sit in your room?
To be honest,
and practice?
I've never practiced. And
never,
but I've played an awful lot. So I don't use the word practice because I think it's kind of slightly negative. Sure, you need to be agile, you need to know how to, move your hands around the guitar and all that stuff. If that's practicing, I guess I do, but more than that, what I did was, instead of believing that I could learn a lot by repetition of scales and that. I just did my own improvising and trying to learn things I wanted to play from records. So I did my own work, those 100,000 hours definitely went in 10 years. I definitely did that much time because I could sit in my room and, try and play like Chet, try and play like Wes, try and play like Tal. I had all these idols. I could have a go at playing like them, And as I did that, that was my practice. But it wasn't little. But I do know that. I do know how to do that. And if I've been a little bit lazy, dare I say, or a tour's finished and then I've let 5 days go and I haven't touched the guitar, I might do a little warm-up, but I'd call that a warm-up more than a practice because I wouldn't spend any length of time doing that because I'm too interested in either improvising or playing. What I like to do is pick out a solo piece I wrote 20 years ago that I haven't played for 5 years, play it right for myself.
Yeah.
Play it right.
Yeah.
Just play that piece, fine. And I can do that with most of my pieces. I can pull them way back, even in the practice sense. I haven't practiced them, but I can still pull them out and play them quite well. And that gives me tremendous confidence, not only to write more, but to know that repertoire is kind of built into my DNA.
Yeah.
And, things like Surface Tension, Sketched in the Sun, Second Initial, Clap obviously was the first one. And all those pieces, they're kind of locked inside of me, and I can play them. I can play any of them now. I can play all of them now. But if I practice them, a little warm-up before a tour, then obviously a week before a tour, I'll start playing the music that I'm about to play. I did this time, as this tour approached. I'm not going to tell you what we're playing. You'll have to find out. But basically, I started warming up on some of those tunes just so I was pretty good on them, But so, that's part of the enjoyment. But practicing sounds really dull and boring.
Yeah.
And if you get fed up with practicing, stop practicing and just improvise.
I've talked to such accomplished guitar players, and there's guys that'll tell me, I sleep with my guitar, I'm never not with it, and I'm, in my downtime, I'm still noodling and playing and learning and all that. And there's others that have the approach of kind of like, no, I'm going to make my time committed to when I have a tour, or maybe go back and relearn some of my own old stuff, like you said yourself. With a catalog like what you have, I'm sure there's things you forgot that you did. There are some pieces that come back when I check across some of the albums. Maybe not the 70s because they're so very heavily played, in rotation on stage. But some of the other music does take another, moment in time to check out some of the more fiddly bits. Do you remember your first guitar? Yeah, I do. Yeah, I remember buying it in a place called King's Cross about a week before Christmas in 1959. My father took me to the shop and said, okay, which one of these do you want then? And it was a cello guitar, regular shape, no cutaway, F-holes, and I bought that, and for a while that's all I had. And about 2 years later, I bought an electric guitar, because obviously that's where I was going. Sure.
But it was good grounding playing but at that time, although I like pop music, the Shadows, Duane Eddy, that was all starting to happen. Rock and roll had already got going, and I love Chuck Berry and all this kind of thing. But I actually had a dance band chord book called Eric Kershaw's. I've seen other guitarists have said exactly the same thing. This chord book was brilliant. It wasn't confusing. It wasn't called 1,001 chords, and you kind of, I'll never remember them. It just said these are chords, and this is each key how you can. So it was good about chord inversions, and that was my only practicing. Was really like moving from weird chords, like E flat, flat 9. 11 or something, and so you just kind of move to another chord from it. That was pretty good. That's my mainly physical representation of learning, was just to look at chord symbols, a chord chart really, but the chord symbol would have the 6 strings and the 3 frets, and you could see what the fingering was, and I love that. Sounds like your parents were supportive of you playing music. You said your dad took you to get the guitar, right? Yeah, they took some talking into it. 2 years. 2 years. That's 746 days. So it took a while, but then after a while, when I was playing in pubs and they came and saw me, they were very, very supportive. They came to lots of shows, and they helped me buy the 175, my most amazing guitar that I love so much. That my father helped me buy that, and I paid for the rest of it. So they were very supportive. And the family, my brothers and sisters, they were pretty supportive,
Let me ask you about just a few more things on Yes, and then a few other things I want to talk about. And I'm sure some people here in the audience and listening would love to talk with you. We're joined by the great Steve Howe right now, live on Trunk Nation on volume from the Yes Cruise, which is Cruise to the Edge. I don't know. I think this is the sixth. This is
the sixth
one, and it just keeps getting bigger and growing each and every time with all these incredible bands. I want to ask you about Yes and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which was so unbelievably overdue. It was maybe one of the greatest oversights of the many that they've had. I'm an outspoken critic of how some of the iconic bands have been ignored. You guys may be more so than ever. But the moment happens, the evening happens. Your recollections about it and how you feel about it now finally being in and the performance.
Okay, that seems like a simple question. It's kind of hard. I'll approach it like
time.
this. Yeah, I haven't though. No, I'm kidding. But basically, there was an awful lot of talk before it, obviously behind the scenes, between the camps.
Right.
Because they're clearly at that time, prior to Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, there were two camps. There was Yes and there was ARW. So there was a lot of talk about what was going to happen, who was going to play what, and then Geddy Lee comes along into the situation somehow and says, well, I like to play bass, on Roundabout, so okay. So we started to get ideas about who, we're having a special guest doing Roundabout, and then there was a concept that, well, I won't go through all the concepts, but it ended up that the concept I'd put myself down for was if nobody else was playing bass, I'd play it on Owner of Lonely Heart. That would be quite a nice sentiment for me to play Chris's part. I learnt it note for note. And
really,
even the little slides.
in the event that would happen?
Well, it did happen. Yeah, I did play the bass on Owner of Lonely Heart. It wasn't very noticeable because, there were people running about in the audience.
But I know that you did. But in preparation for that, you said that was a potential thing before it was locked down, and you just said, "Let me go ahead."
I went along with it. Geddy stepped in on the bass on Roundabout, so. I didn't need to play guitar on Owner of Lonely Heart much, so I thought, well, I'll play bass. That would be quite constructive. So as I said, I really loved learning everything Chris did on it, which wasn't very much, because compared to a usual Chris Squire bass part, Owner of Lonely Heart's like, you could play it in the bath, because it's very straightforward. And in fact, 90125 most probably suffers mostly from not featuring the bass and drums like the 70s records did, like Drama did. You put Drama on, you're going to hear the bass and drums working their arse off the whole time.
Yeah.
But you put 90125 on, and there's a guy playing the bass and the guy playing the drums. It's much more incidental. The tension was put into the keyboards, vocals, and guitar, which was their choice. So to play Owner was fairly straightforward, and we did that. So, we had a rehearsal, I'm not going to say a lot about it. It was kind of what it was. It was workmanlike. And then we did the warm-up in the afternoon with the cameras, and that's when everything became apparent just how big and huge this was. This was like a 17,000-seater. The stage was littered with cameras and lights. It was very exciting. So come round the time, of course, ELO were the first ones up, and then Joan Baez, and then eventually, it came Yes's chance, so we went up. And I mean, I think we did all right on playing together, considering we don't play together, strictly. I mean, Alan and I were from one camp, and the other guys were from the other camp. So that went through. We did some crazy interviews, which I hope never got broadcast afterwards together. There was a lot of craziness going on after. I think we were all relieved that we got through it fairly unscathed. So, and then that was it, and then it was like, okay, goodbye. And we both got on with our other worlds again. But of course, as a moment in time for Yes, it was very, very important. And I'd like to say it was most probably more important to Chris Squire, who wasn't there, of course. It was more important to Chris than anybody. He was the one who moaned more. I mean, I'm not really that big on awards, and I got some lovely awards, and thank you. But, it's like another award. It's great.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I was absolutely out of my mind about how long it took for you to get in, because Chris wasn't there.
Yeah.
And I had Geddy on this show very recently and talked to him about playing, which was a hero, which you guys are heroes of his. Yeah. And I thought that was a wonderful moment, I thought it was a very cool thing the way that went down. And I give you guys tremendous credit because Steve, in the history of the Hall of Fame, you see bands that have clear divisions, guys that aren't in the band anymore, separate camps as you guys have, and they put up a front, and I won't do this if this one doesn't do this. and they don't. They say they're all about the fans, but in the end, they really don't do what the fans want. You guys, for whatever's going on, sucked it up and went up there and delivered exactly what the fans wanted.
Thanks,
and I thought you deserve so much credit for that.
Thanks.
Well, so does the audience. There you go. Absolutely.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's really great that we kind of did it professionally. Yes, has always wanted to do that. But as I was saying, it meant a lot to Chris, and over the years, he was one of the main people that said, why is that happening? So, of course, it did happen too late, for Chris, bless him. But I think, in the spirit world, he knows that, because he felt that, in a way, it says something, about the fans' adoration for us, but also he felt that Yes had really been lacking, sometimes with a certain magazine showing immense
a certain
disinterest.
Magazine. We're talking about the Rock and Roll of Fame. We know what magazine he means.
I think we know what magazine we're talking about. Ignored us intensely and gave us a paragraph in a whole encyclopedia about rock bands that was most undeserving. But there again, so I think Chris particularly felt that the industry had never really shown us very much. The fans had, but the industry had never really acknowledged us quite enough. So this was the ecliptic thing Chris always wanted. So bless him, we got it, Chris. And, it's a great thought that it did come round. It's a shame, as we've said before, that, he wasn't here to enjoy it.
Was it something, you said yourself, you've always somewhat been indifferent about awards.
Yeah.
The fans obviously were outraged that it took so long for Yes to get in. But internally with you and the rest of the guys, was it just something that, hey, you have no control over it, of course, but was it kind of like, hey, if it happens, but you certainly don't need them to validate the career of
Yes?
Yes.
That's well put. Yeah, I mean, we weren't going to be dependent or disappointed year after year, but I think to some degree some people were disappointed year after year that we didn't get a placement there or maybe in some other camps as well. So there was an element of that, but I think we've always strived on, irregardless of the exteriors.
Right.
That doesn't make us insular. What it means is it makes us very determined to be what we are and find our feet as our own band and not fall short or needing some kind of other support, because we've had managers and some of them have been great. Yes's current manager, Martin Dove, was fantastic. But I mean, we've had some problematic managers as well. And, it's not fair. I was talking with some friends earlier about how vulnerable musicians have been over the years to being ripped off. It's just that I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to give you a sob story about me being ripped off, but I can tell you that generally a lot of musicians have been ripped off, and some of it you can never put right. It just can never be made right. And that's a great shame, but it shows the vulnerability of an artist is maybe to think too much about the art and not much about how he's going to feed his family.
Right.
You mustn't put things too much out of perspective. So there has to be a balance. But fortunately, there are people out there, who love managing and being accountants and being lawyers for bands, whose hearts are in the right place. You've just got to find those people.
Couple more things from me, and then we'll get something from the audience. And I want to talk, of course, about what Yes has going forward. But I want to ask you about Asia. And the first record, when it comes out, the immediate, incredible success of that record. Did it take you by surprise that it was so successful out of the gate?
Well, I tried to look fairly blasé about it, kind of been here, done this before, But I was excited. I was really excited. The big difference for me was that Yes was a band that sort of slowly, exploded into the public, just slowly. I mean, 2 albums, and then I came in, and the Yes album didn't really break America, got to number 30, took Fragile, so that's the 4th album, So I was delighted for this reason, partially, personally, that I made it without Yes. It was a different stream of consciousness about the members in this band. So Asia was a great band, and John and I actually started the band by sharing songs and jamming together, and then we got Carl in, and then Jeff came in, and it was complete. So it was a wonderful thing. And when we came out with that record, I mean, it did sound right. I mean, it sounded like the right thing at the moment. Heat of the moment. And but Geffen did a great job. David Geffen and his company did a great job to launch this. You can't pretend that wasn't happening, but it was, and it helped us, and we launched, and You know, at that time we were terrific on stage as well. The first tour shows were all very high energy. You know, Carl, you know, brought his presence. We all brought our presence to the show. Jeff with his technology, and John with his soulful singing. You know, and me with my guitar styles. It was a wonderful. But none of them. It wasn't like ELP, and it wasn't like Yes, and it wasn't like King Crimson. So in a way, that's where we benefited, because we were a unique band at that time. So, but we were rushed into the second album, you know, and disappointed that it, you know, didn't sell as much, and we shouldn't have been. You know, we should have maybe been more determined there and thought about it. But maybe we should have thought about not rushing into the second album.
Right, yeah,
that would have been the best scenario. But those pressures come along, and it seems apparent that you're on a roll and you go for it, you know. But really, you're not on a roll. You've got to regroup and re-prepare for an album, because the first album's writing is very consistently strong and powerful, because it had the union of Wet and Downs, but also John and my writing in there had a lot of, you know, a lot of input, if you like, from the styles that we were bringing. And the way I worked with John on Here Comes That Feeling, Without You, Cutting It Fine, and a collaborative time again. All those things were to its benefit, because many groups are great teams, you know. And some bands that just have one guy out the front. This is the old cliche about bands, you know. Guy out the front, he sings, and everybody else is replaceable. Well, when Yes came along, that kind of changed.
Yeah, for sure.
Know? And people really started to value the commitments. Like Roger Waters still, you know, doing Pink Floyd. Doesn't actually need to call it Pink Floyd, of course. But Dave Gilmour and Nick Mason, they all added something to Floyd that wasn't easy to change.
And the final thing before we talk to keep you just a few more minutes and talk to some of the audience is, when looking over your career, of course, people go to Yes, they'll go to Asia, they'll go to GTR, they'll go to your solo stuff, whatever. But I was unaware that you've actually played some stuff for other artists, like that you played on a Queen album.
Right. Yeah.
And did I read right? Frankie Goes to Hollywood?
That's right. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Can you talk about those two in particular? First with Queen, who are enjoying a huge renaissance now with this film.
Wow.
You have a huge history with those guys?
Well, I mean, part of my training was that I used to find I got along well with producers. And in the 60s, there was a guy called Mark Wirtz. He started booking me to play guitar on things. You know, I got used to just being a session guitar. I knew I didn't want to be a session guitarist. You know, this was not my career. But it was a great hand turn. So later on, as life went by and people called me up, you know, Terry Reid called me up and said, will you do a show with me? You know, we played at the Queen Elizabeth Hall. You know, so the 70s go through and I'm picking up little gigs, you know, just one-off things. And then, of course, Trevor Horn was making, the Frankie Goes to Hollywood. And they wanted some guitar, you know, and I've got loads of stories about people wanting something. It's not always a guitar. Funny enough, Trevor himself, I was the only person he could think that played a washboard when he needed a washboard, right? This is true.
A washboard.
Yeah. I need somebody to play a washboard. I think Steve plays one. Call him up.
Steve Howe,
so he calls him out and he goes, don't you play the washboard? You played it on that track Ram, didn't you? I saw you doing it on the video. So I said, I love playing washboard. He said, well, come down, bring it down.
Were you being serious?
Yeah.
You
and
do
I
love
did a
playing
session.
washboard.
I did play a session. It was for Malcolm McLaren.
Malcolm McLaren, sure.
Yeah.
Who managed the Sex Pistols.
Yeah, he did a couple of records with Trevor, and I'm on the B-side of one of them playing washboard. But more excitingly, the ones you're talking about, I was just in Montreux. I saw a Queen tech, you know, and he said, come down the studio. The guys are working on the album they're making. So I go in, and they say to me, play the guitar on this track, you know. And I said, you don't need, Brian's done some lovely things. He said, well, just go kind of wild on the top, you know. We're not going wild enough here. We want something a bit wild. So those kind of opportunities are great. I mean, I remember one session I went in and they were going to send me home if I couldn't read music. And I said, well, I don't read music. And they said, well, but we thought you'd read music. I said, I don't read any music, but charts, you know, cool chart. And they said, well, how are you going to do this? I said, just play it to me 2 or 3 times. All right. They played it to me. I said, I know it now. I'll play it. You know? So my ears have been my vehicle, you know. It's not my eyes and what's written on a piece of paper. In fact, I can't really play the guitar looking at a piece of paper. It doesn't. So I need to know stuff about it, but it's mainly through the audio. But doing sessions is really a good turn on, And, you know, Frankie, I did also on their on their second album, which was called Liverpool, I played some interesting guitar on that, and I played a bit of the bass on Two Tribes. Part of the bass that goes like the bass in there is made up from me as well. So, so there's a lot of ways you can be part of it. But also I played with Rick Wakeman, and I played on the Lou Reed album in the early 70s. So, I'm proud of those little guestings. They're nice.
Sure, and we've learned something today on this 6th Cruise to the Edge, that if you need a great washboard player, you call Steve Howe, ladies and gentlemen. All right, here's what I want to do. I want to take a quick break. Steve, if you can give me like 10 more minutes, that would be fantastic. When you get a break in, we're going to come back. I want to ask you about what Yes has going on this year. And then from there, we'll take a few questions from the audience here on the ship and maybe some of our callers as well if you'd like to talk to Steve Howe at 844-686-5863, 844-6-VOLUME. We'll come right back and wrap up a few more minutes with Steve Howe of Yes here on Trunk Nation on Volume from Cruise to the Edge.
Trunk Nation.
Live off the coast of, well, it doesn't matter. Here's your rock and roll cruise director, Eddie Trunk.
Okay, we have about 10 minutes left to go here on Trunk Nation on this Tuesday, our first broadcast from all week on Cruise to the Edge, and it's been so brilliant to have Steve Howe here with me from Yes. We got a few more minutes left. I'll try to get some questions in from the audience, but I do, Steve, want to give you a second, if you can, to talk a little bit about what Yes has going after this cruise, because you're going out on the road, right? You've got a tour?
Well, yeah. I mean, we're not going to sit idle for too long. Yeah. And this is a short burst, and we've got another short burst coming up where we go to Japan. So that's how we close out February. We're off to Japan. We've got some lovely shows in Nagoya, Osaka, and 3 in Tokyo. So that's wonderful, because that's another kind of world that we do, tune very heavily into. We take a few months off, get on with our own lives for a while, but in the summer, I'm not going to tell you much about it, but we're going to have one hell of a show in the summer, June, July, and I'm going to tell you anything more other than it sounds like somebody, like your president. It's going to be a hell of a show, guys. It's really going to be a good show. And, like what we tend to do as Yes is do 1 year where the summer really does feature us, and it's, we're in theaters, we're in nice venues, we're in amphitheaters, and then the next year we kind of get together with some other people,
right,
and make a show that's kind of more like a summer show. So we never do that 2 years in a running, because we don't want to, but we're coming to it this year, and I think it's going to be a real showstopper. So
there are a lot of bands that have been doing this for as long as you have, a lot of artists that have been doing it as long as you have in your age group that are still out there and doing it well, but a lot of them are starting to talk about how it's going to end and retirement and farewells and things like that.
Yeah.
Something that seems to never come from you. Do you feel like you are just going to keep doing this, or do you feel like there's some sort of end at some point?
It's really hard to say. I mean, I'd like to think, it's just going to kind of, go on while things feel good and they're playing well and it's a happy. But I think as you get older, obviously you like things to make you happy. You're not so prepared to make things, to do things that are too difficult. So it's beautiful that Yes are in this wonderful time from last year, particularly when the band started playing so well together. It became very joyful. And, so we're really doing it. So I'd hate to put any kind of time limit or time extension on the fact that there's still a lot of energy to go forward.
Yeah. And the last thing before we try to grab someone from the audience, my friend Eric mentioned during the break of all the iconic Yes artwork, and I know that's a big part of Yes's history. And Roger Dean, who did much of that art, is on the ship, right?
That's right. Well, Roger's been joining us on these cruises for many years, and I'm hesitant to say with full commitment, but I think he might be on quite a few of our shows in the summer as well.
Oh, nice.
So basically, his art's been synonymous with us since Fragile. I'm sure there's been a few gaps that partly I and he would sometimes like to forget, but basically 90% of all sleeves are Roger's, and it's been
the Asia record as well.
Asia, yeah, and ABWH too, and other things, and some of my solo albums, I'm very proud to say. So basically, Roger's had such a great influence on the Yes look, that he's given us a great deal. Him teaming up with his brother, as he did occasionally on staging as well, has brought a lot of visual pleasantries to our music. And I was never aware that music needed a look to make it go down well. But I think Roger did something very few could do, and he brought something that really seemed to connect with our music, and it was made to be. It was meant to be.
We have a few. Maybe we have about 5 minutes left before we have to wrap up. Come on up to a microphone if anybody has a question for Steve Howe here on the cruise. Go ahead and fire away. Hey, sir, what's your name and where are you from?
Hi, Eddie. Hi, Steve. This is Scott from New Mexico.
Oh, Scott.
Hey, Scott.
What would you say is the most definitive moment in your career with Yes, and your most definitive or inspirational moment in your career?
Well, that's a really difficult question because there isn't one. There can't be one single moment. But, if I was just to kind of skim across the horizon and look for one, obviously when Yes maybe first sold out Madison Square Gardens, that was pretty big for us. We'd got to a point there where we really knew we were there then. We were at this point. And in my personal life, that's almost impossible too. But, in my solo career, being able to have the freedom to do my own records means a lot to me. I can write them, produce them, edit them, decide what they look like. That's a lot of fun too, because most of my work is with groups where you have to compromise, come to terms, argue a little, but it's all worth it.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question.
Thank you. What's your name?
Michael from Sydney, Australia.
Michael from Sydney, Australia.
Hello, Eddie and Steve.
Hello.
A few years ago, I had the privilege of going to the Ahmet Ertegun Memorial Concert, which Alan and Chris both played at.
Yeah.
Just wondering how influential was Ahmet on because I know he was very much influential on Led Zeppelin's career.
Yeah.
How much did his support mean to Yes?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. It's hard to know exactly how to answer it, but I mentioned earlier that I had great admiration for him, and in the later years he was always there, even when we didn't sign to Atlantic. And I remember him coming into a session one day. We were like, "Wow, Ahmet's here, but this record's not for Atlantic." And he came over and said, "Well, what's it going to take for you to get back on Atlantic, Steve, then?" So I loved his intimacy. He could be very intimate, and he'd take you aside and he'd chat, and he did like the truth. What he came to me for is I think he thought he'd get the bottom line from me, I'm very proud to say that about how he always seemed to chat with me one-to-one. And I had to make him a little, he'd asked me once, is the whole album as good as this song? I was like, yeah, Ahmet, yeah. he knew by my delivery exactly how. So we really did love him. And John Anderson and I occasionally went to his apartment in Kensington that he had in London when he was in town. And the other great thing about Ahmet was that he was never alone. He always had two beautiful women, one on each side. So well done, Ahmet. We loved you. Of course, he was a genius in a way because he could hear stuff that the world hadn't yet heard, like from the artists, from Aretha and Otis and and Ray Charles. He knew jazz. You see, where I think we had a connection because I've never had a time in my life when I didn't think about jazz a little bit, and I think he came from that school as well. Him and his brother. They were great people. Thanks for asking that. Very sweet.
Thank you very much.
Talking about Ahmet Ertegun, the founder of Atlantic Records, which of course Yes was signed to. Go ahead, sir. What's your name and where are you from?
Jeff from Pompano Beach, Florida. Hi, Steve.
Hi there.
Hi, Eddie.
Hi, Jeff.
Just wondering what it was like. I had heard that I wasn't there, but Patrick Moraz joined you last year in Philadelphia to play soon. I had heard about that, saw a little bit of it, and amazing. I was just wondering what it was like to play with Patrick again. Probably over 30 years, right?
That's
a while.
Right. Well, I'm very proud to say that Patrick was a great help to me when I was making my album beginnings, and basically he kind of did some marvelous things for me. So I knew this guy's a thoroughbred, brilliant musician. He's done so much on his own that he's almost like he's a solo act. This guy, some pianists can do that. They take the piano. And it becomes an orchestra, and that's Patrick. So the difficulty for him, most probably with Yes, was that we weren't about that, So we kind of thought he was going to come in with some little parts,
Right.
like, oh yeah, this is how I did, because he played soon. It's his part. So he hadn't really done that. He'd kind of come in a bit more like, the full orchestra. So that was what he did. And I think people loved to see him back there so much. And we did too. He was cuddly. He was Patrick. And he was fun. Really good. Thanks for
you.
the question.
Time for maybe one more. Go ahead,
Yeah.
sir. Your name and where you're from.
Jack from San Diego.
Hey, Jack.
I was honored to photograph you guys in '74 at San
Wow.
Diego
Yeah.
Sports Arena.
Oh, we used to play there. Yeah, that
that
was
was
great.
Balboa Stadium.
Oh, wow.
Of
Jack's
you
got
when you were a
some
youngster.
old
Yeah.
yes photos here that he
Yeah.
just threw on the table.
San Diego was always known as a culturally backwards city. Did the
It was a
musicians-
party city, like
Well, did the musicians
Baltimore.
did the musicians have a problem playing there because the audiences were maybe less responsive than Hollywood or LA or New
I
York?
don't
Places
really
like that?
remember it like that. I mean, when Yes went to the West Coast, we were pretty struck by, this was a beautiful place. Everybody was beautiful. It was great fun. Everyone was having a lot of fun on the West Coast, And, but we didn't differentiate between those shows. I mean, we did like Long Beach, I mean, we did the Forum a lot. Sure, we loved that. But San Diego was a little bit wilder, and I think we liked that. We like wild. It's like when you see a video of Yes, and we're playing, in a big theater, and it's got 11 cameras. But when you see us playing in Lugano or Montreux Jazz or something, we're a bit wilder, and I think that was a good thing about San Diego. It was a bit wild, and that brings out a little excitement in our music. That's not about, we've got to live up to this thing in the Forum in LA. It's more like, that's done. Let's have fun. So it was loose.
Well, thanks.
Thanks for your question. San
Thank
Diego.
you. And there's your photos back, sir.
Great, thanks.
Thank
Good
you.
to see them.
Well, listen, that's about going to put a button on it for our first broadcast from Cruise to the Edge here on Volume for Trunk Nation. And I can't thank you enough, Steve. I greatly
right.
appreciate you coming
Thanks.
by and
Thank you,
being so generous with your time. Have some great gigs on the ship.
All right, thank you.
And we look forward to seeing you on the road. It sounds like this summer, a little
This
bit
summer.
later on, with some big
be good.
big Yes activity going on. We'll keep
Great.
an eye on the internet, as they say, and
All right.
find out what's going on. Have great gigs. Thank you so
Thanks.
much. Honored
Lovely
to
to
meet
be
you,
here.
sir.
Thanks, guys.
Steve Howe, everybody, joining us here on Trunk Nation. You can go out that way, sir, and get you right out of there. All right, and thank you to Michael Sadler of Saga, who was joining me earlier. And what a great, and Larry Morand, of course, from On the Blue Cruises. What a great first broadcast from Cruise to the Edge. See you guys again live tomorrow, 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Follow on Twitter. I'll let you know who the guests are going to be. Have a good night, everybody.